Good afternoon. I'm Ellie Sullivan, co-chair of the City Club Special Programs Committee. Our program today is the final offering of the three-part series entitled Northeast Ohio Naturally, a theme that is meant to showcase people, places, and opportunities that bear out the theory that the interrelated elements of nature, health, and recreation, joined as a lifestyle, is on the rise in our post-industrial world. It also seeks to convey how that sensibility is being expressed in our community today. The committee will consider a second phase of Northeast Ohio Naturally for spring, focusing on some of the recent initiatives that demonstrate the point. Those initiatives are related to the growing popularity of biking, hiking, running, canoeing, birding, kayaking, and more. Our program today features Mr. Brian Zimmerman, the new Executive Director of the Cleveland MetroParks. We welcome Mr. Zimmerman to the greater Cleveland community. Introducing Mr. Zimmerman today is someone well known in Northeast Ohio's planning community. Previously with the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission, James Kostelik now serves as MetroParks Principal Planner. He holds an undergraduate degree in geography from the University of Kansas and a master's degree from Kent State University in urban geography. He is the immediate past chair of the Ohio Coastal Resources Advisory Council and currently an adjunct professor of urban and regional planning at Cleveland State University's Levin College of Urban Affairs. I am pleased to call Jim Kostelik to the City Club podium.
Thank you, Ellie. I appreciate it, and good afternoon, everyone. After a national search, Brian Zimmerman was named to the post of Executive Director of Cleveland MetroParks on January 28th of this year. He's only the sixth director of the Park District in its 93-year history, following such notable park administrators as William Stinchcomb, Harold Groth, and Vern Hartenberg. Brian began his tenure with Cleveland MetroParks in March of 2010. It was exactly 1 year ago today, or actually tomorrow, that I first met Brian. I was asked to pick him up at the airport and spend a couple of days showing him the park system facilities and resources. After my initial reaction of, boy, is he young, I was extremely impressed with his knowledge and his understanding of relevant ecological issues, park facilities, and the history of the Emerald Necklace. His communication skills with park employees are readily apparent as we toured the different reservations. Prior to coming to Cleveland MetroParks, Brian was Chief of Operations at Milwaukee County Parks, Recreation, and Culture. There, he managed a $41 million capital budget, operating budget, and a $10 million capital budget. His responsibilities included overseeing 15,000 acres of parkland, including natural resources, trails, golf courses, and playgrounds. Like Cleveland MetroParks, Milwaukee County Parks is a recent winner of the prestigious National Gold Medal Award, which is the highest national honor for a park and recreation organization. Brian's other past experience includes a stint in Michigan and working with the Washington County Park System in Hartford, Wisconsin. Brian is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin, something he keeps reminding Buckeye fans all the time lately, and holds a bachelor's degree in agricultural science. Brian is currently involved in Cleveland's group plan discussion and is a member of the Leadership Cleveland class of 2011. I'm pleased to present Cleveland MetroParks Executive Director Brian M. Zimmerman.
Well, thank you, Jim. Thank you all for attending today. I did bring a number of staff. The Chief Probate Judge, Judge Russo, is here, and Commissioner Hinker, all to confirm that I am the Executive Director. I am not the intern. I am not the parking counter. I'm not the animal keeper. All things of which have been described or I've been been asked whether I was those positions. So it was kind of an interesting first 7 months here. It was kind of like the undercover boss as I would go out through the park system. So it's been a true pleasure for the last 7 months. It's truly an honor to be speaking in front of the City Club. We were doing a little bit of background work when we first got here to see if Stinchcombe, the founder and visionary of the park system, had spoke here, and turned out he was one of the founders of this great City Club and free speech forum. So we couldn't confirm whether he had spoke here or not, but at some point in time I'd like to find out whether he had spoke here or not. So again, it's an honor to be here to speak to you with what the Plain Dealer calls Northeast Ohio's #1 asset. I've kind of themed this presentation in sections of 3 because I know for some people they can't remember more than 3 things at one time. So I'm going to try to keep it to 3 different 3 things for the presentation. The first part includes kind of how I got here, how I shaped my life, and how things have kind of, things that the Plain Dealer haven't necessarily reported on, the jobs or the things that I've kind of gone through. The second part is kind of where MetroParks is today, currently, as a result of the shaping of the other 5 directors. And the final is the final part is where we are headed in the future. The very first part kind of relates back to growing up on a farm, stewardship and conservation. I can remember talking with my father and grandfather on a number of different occasions of why we were doing different things on the farm. And one of them happened to be we were fencing off along a waterway, one of the riparian corridors, and we had animals that would have to get to the other side, and we were trying to help slow runoff and some of the other things, and where the cows would actually degradate the sides. So my parents were one of the first to help do that in the area. As well as creating riparian corridors and waterways throughout the entire farm to help with runoff and that type of thing. So growing up, stewardship and conservation were part of the fabric of how I started to shape my life. The next job that I'd like to talk about that helped shape, I had spent 2 days working at a hog testing facility. I was actually on the wrong end of a shovel for a greater part of one full day, and starting to learn that at a very early age, I realized that I wanted to be in a decision-making role, not necessarily on the other end of the shovel. So I reported back the next day to work, and I was given a long pair of boots all the way up, almost past my knees, and was told to carry this 50-pound sack into this area where there was about 6 large hogs, and I had to maneuver, and I said, "Why the big long boots?" And he goes, "Well, you'll see when you get in there." Okay, so I climb over the fence, he hands me this thing, and I've got to go back to this feeder, and next thing you know, all these hogs are like attacking me and trying to move me around as I'm trying to move the feed. So I thought, well, being creative and like-minded, why wouldn't we move that feeder to the front of the pen so that I don't actually have to crawl in the back of the pen and get attacked by the things? Well, that wasn't too well received. I was just told to get back and do my job. So early on, I knew that I wanted to be a leader and not on the wrong end of a shovel. One of the other things that, one of the goals I had, as Jim mentioned, I did go to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and yes, it's been a good year so far for the Badgers. But going to college, one of my goals at the university was to graduate with no loans. And to do that, I had to work a number of different jobs, to include sometimes 40 hours a week, between running a heavy security company, working for a golf course, managing a bar, and running a landscape company. And one of the things I learned early on, I was about 19 years old, and I'd worked for the security company about a year and a half, and previously we were doing the U2 concert, and we were doing an overnight, and we had these semis parked at all remote locations, and we had to monitor that nobody would mess with the equipment and things. So the next year when we did, Genesis came to town, and I had moved up, and a friend and I were running the Madison branch, and I thought, well, why would we have these semi-stage all over the place? Why wouldn't we have them right here? Because at the end of the show, they have to back up and load all the equipment up. So I made this decision, this bright decision, 19-year-old kid, to move the semis closer to the stadium, because that made a lot of sense to me, that we wouldn't have to pay staff at all these remote locations and make sure they weren't sleeping during the middle of the night. Well, lo and behold, I get a call over the radio that I'm called to the tour promoter's office. So I have to walk all the way up, and I'm like wondering what's going to happen, because it was kind of against their wishes, but it seemed to make a lot of sense to me. So I had my story that I was going to say to this person, and again, when you're dealing with tour promoters, they're from all over the world, and they've got all different types of attitudes and different things, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And I just had the story, and I looked at the person just straight in the eyes, and I said, these were the decisions that I made. I realized that it may not have been in concert with what you were thinking, but these are the reasons why. And honest to God, it turned out fantastic. But it was the eye contact that I made, it was the posture that I had. So early on, I learned those things. I defended my decision at a very early age, at age 19. So again, I was happy to graduate from the university with no loans due to a lot of hard work. The second part, now getting into the history of MetroParks. I'd like to read a couple things about the creation of MetroParks, talk about the mission, how conservation, education, and recreation have been a fabric of the park system. The Cleveland MetroParks was established by legislation creating the Park District, specifically the Ohio Revised Code, Section 1545.11, which states, the Park Board of Commissioners may acquire lands either within or without the Park District for conservation into forest reserves and for the conservation of natural resources of the state, including streams, lakes, submerged lands, and swampland, and to those ends may create parks, parkways, forest reservations, and other reservation and forests, develop and improve, protect, and promote the use of the same in a manner as the board deems conducive to the general welfare. The mission, which has stood the test of time for the 93-plus years with slight revisions when the zoo came in, the Cleveland MetroParks will conserve significant natural resources and enhance people's lives by providing safe, high-quality outdoor education, recreation, and zoological opportunities. Further, the Cleveland MetroParks Zoo is committed to improving the future of wildlife. The conservation, education, and recreation, again, the theory of three, the three parts to the mission. The former director, Vern Hartenberg, he'd always talked about the three parts to the mission and how it creates the total system, how one supports the other, which then supports the other. The founder and visionary, Pat and I were talking about volunteers and different civic groups getting involved, even down at Camp Cheerful. Stinchcomb, back in 1905, was the very first volunteer in this great park system. He was working for the city, and he served as a city parks engineer, and then he volunteered to basically donate his time up until the creation of the Park District in 1917, and then was hired as the first park director in 1921. In early 1905, he wrote to then Mayor Tom Johnson. He wrote in his annual report about the park system, and it's very timely. I want to suggest the advisability of ultimately establishing an outer system of parks and boulevards. Through the valleys of the Rocky River on the west and the Chagrin River on the east lie some of the finest stretches of natural parklands to be found in the northern part of Ohio. While all of this is now entirely outside of the city, it will be but a short time before they will be inside or very near the limits of greater Cleveland. What I find interesting is when you think back to 1905, here was a guy that was planning he was thinking 100-plus years ahead. And as we're coming to the next portion of the presentation, we'll talk about where we're at in the timing of this great system. So when you think about Stinchcomb and the vision, and then I was out, as we got here early, we were looking at some of the other things that helped shape the Park District, and FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was a speaker here at the City Club, and one of the things that during the Depression era and then after, if you look at the CCC and the WPA influences on this park system are absolutely dramatic. So when the park system started in the first 15 to 20 years, they were really holding land and conserving land, and then after that, when all those projects started to come to fruition, the park system happened to open up at that point in time where the trails were cut through and where paths were put in and where picnic areas and shelters, really giving public access. And it actually, Stinchcomb took a lot of heat because he had really sold it as a conservation type agency. And as they started to open these things up, the public had felt they'd been betrayed, that they were no longer conserving, but really they were providing public access to all of these parks all over from, again, the east side to the west side, Rocky River being the first one. A few of the things, fast forwarding almost 93 years, we are a 93-year-old park system. Some of the current projects that we're currently working on, and some of the team here is working on, we are working with the Huntington Reservation right now on the west side of the greater Cleveland area. We're looking at shoreline stabilization. We're receiving some grants on the federal and local level to look at shoreline revetment and stabilizing the bluff. We're looking at the jetties that go out into the lake and how to create more sand on the beach areas. We're also looking at applying for Blue Wave certification, which is a clean beaches initiative to make sure that we're doing all of the things up to the national standards. If we were to receive that that certification, we would be the first in Ohio. Our goal is to apply for that coming into the next year. One of the projects that is still receiving statewide attention is the Lake to Lake Trail, which is a 2.3-mile tour. I had the pleasure of job shadowing, as I said, with a lot of our staff, and I took weather advice from a naturalist, which I don't know if it was necessarily the right answer. We get out, and I have my umbrella and I'm ready to go, and he's like, I'm like, is it going to rain? He goes, oh no, there's not a cloud in the sky. It's not going to rain. Well, we got about 2 miles of the 2.3 down, and yet we still had to come back, and the heavens opened up, and we absolutely got soaked. I mean, from top to bottom. But I can tell you, it was just one of the most awesome experiences to walk 2.3 miles and talk about nature and see how the ducks came out, and how alive that connection, that commuter trail. It connects over 7.5 miles to the Big Creek Reservation and 9.6 miles to the Millstream Reservation. It's a huge process in wetland restoration, the greenway planting, and invasive species management. And the way that was built was truly remarkable, and the impact that it had on the environment. One of the new projects that's coming up, which I see there's a few people in the audience, the West Creek Reservation in the city of Parma, the 7th largest city in the state of Ohio, and soon to be the Watershed Stewardship Center. We are in partnership with a number of organizations to include the Northeast Ohio Sewage District. We are looking at restoring and preserving over 324 plus acres. We currently received over a $500,000 grant to help link some of the trailway connections through there. We are looking at creating a living learning laboratory all on watershed stewardship and how we're going to do different things in the future. Some of the big projects that keep coming forward that we're working with is how do we handle stormwater runoff and combined sewer overflows and those things. And this facility is going to be truly a remarkable facility. We look to break ground first part of next year with completion sometime in the middle of 2012. Also, we have two components here, 3 from the zoo, Liz Fowler, Steve Taylor, and Sue Allen. They have been at a project for over 5 years, and we're looking very forward to the completion of the African Elephant Project. It's an over a $25 million project, and it's truly a transformational part to the zoo. When you come in, having been here only 6 months, I haven't got to see it from start to finish, but I can truly tell you it's really taken shape, and it's a truly impressive facility. And bringing the 3 elephants back and the new bull Willie that's been secured is going to be truly transformational for the zoo. The next part, part 3, as remember we talked about things in 3, so you can remember hopefully 3 things from the presentation. We are looking at our strategic planning. And when I was introduced, we were talking about how we're going to segue a strategic plan for the MetroParks and how we're going to segue a strategic plan for the zoo, how we're going to bring both of those together. What we're really looking at is, how does the MetroParks provide, and what does it provide as regional benefits? Well, we protect air and water quality, we conserve wildlife habitat, we preserve land and biodiversity of plants, we protect watersheds, and we improve health and wellness. So those are some of the huge regional assets. Part of the plan as we're putting things together, and we're probably 40% of the way through, we are looking at, we're through the inventory, the analysis, we're working on an evaluation, we're bringing in recommendations from staff. We will be looking to create focus groups with key leaders. We'll be hosting public meetings, all setting forth the stage for the 2013 levy campaign, and as we're moving forward to our 100-year celebration in 2017. The Zoo Master Plan is a little bit further along, and they have been working very closely with the Zoological Society on what it means to have one of the premier zoos in all of the country, and where does it go from the future. When you look at its close proximity and relative ease to get to, it's a true treasure true asset to the citizens of Cleveland. Things that we're looking at in this plan as we're kind of moving forward, we've really looked at, from the base reservation teams throughout all of MetroParks, the 16 plus reservations. We have an inventory of all of our staff. We've been looking at how many buildings we have, over 573 plus buildings. We have over 100 plus miles of trail. We have over 63 rangers. We have just a tremendous amount of assets, the biodiversity. We get annually over 45 million hits of different people that come in to the park system. And that's just people that are enjoying it, taking a tour, maybe a walk, maybe a hike, maybe a drive-through on their commute to work. We also have an annual budget of over $99 million, which helps support all of the different infrastructure throughout the whole entire system. We do have our own levy, which is a true asset to the citizens of Cuyahoga County and all of the state of Ohio. Where I came from, we were supported through the county tax, so we were part of a large system that included an airport, that included the zoo, the courts, and the whole thing, so we were always fighting for funding. But it's a true treasure to have stabilized funding for this park system and for the future years. We have more than, again, 140 miles worth of hiking trails, bridle trails, and all-purpose trails. So to have that type of access, to be able to go through and walk and do all those things is absolutely fantastic. Again, as we look to the future, some of the things that we're looking at in the strategic plan is how do mountain bikes integrate into the park system. We are currently working with the Cuyahoga National Valley Park. We're working with MetroParks serving Summit County. We are looking at some shared use. We were looking at how the trails all integrate into different things. We're looking at potentially combining some of the trails and how we're building sustainable trails for the future. We're also looking at, as part of this plan and the strategy, is how do we embrace the fabric of the lakefront. When you look at Stinchcomb's original vision, he really followed all of the riparian corridors all the way around from the Chagrin. He did not really focus a tremendous amount on the Cuyahoga originally, but then the Rocky River. But he really left one of the true assets, the Great Lakes, for the next, in my mind, the next 100 years. So as we're working forward towards our planning and our planning opportunities, really figuring out how the fabric of the downtown area, how one of the Great Lakes ties into the fabric of what we have. Again, I would like to highlight the three things as I finish up here. Again, we are a 93-year-old park system. Again, Stinchcomb's true vision was absolutely astounding back in the day when you think about the creation of Cleveland and the Metropolitan Park District. We have a three-part mission: conservation, recreation, and education, that have stood the test of time, and that's how we really work to govern our system. Again, Stinchcomb, true visionary, and I look forward to the next 100 years in the future. Thank you.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to a special program featuring Brian Zimmerman, Executive Director of Cleveland MetroParks. We will return to our speaker in a minute for the traditional City Club questions. We encourage you to formulate questions for our speaker now and remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point. We welcome you to this City Club special program. Our greetings go to those present in this room, especially those who are guests. We hope you will join the City Club and become active in our ongoing civic dialogue. Friday, November 19th, the City Club will host Bill Adair, editor of PolitiFact, who will measure the truthfulness of the $3 billion spent on political advertisements in the 2010 election. Thursday, December 2nd, the City Club commemorates World AIDS Day with Greg Millett, MPH, Senior Policy Advisor for the Office of National AIDS Policy. If you wish to make reservations or order a CD or DVD of today's program, please call 1-888-223-6786 or 216-621-0082. We are pleased to welcome guests at tables hosted by the Cleveland MetroParks, Mansor, Gavin, Gerlach, and Manis law firm, and the Ohio Canal Corridor. Thank you for joining us today. Now we would like to return to our speaker for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphones today are City Club Special Program Committee members Mike Kallstrom, and Nicole Braden Lewis to my right. First question, please.
I'm Scott Sanders.
Hold on. Is he ready?
I'm Scott Sanders with the Earth Day Coalition. Brian, welcome to Cleveland and your position as head of Cleveland MetroParks. I very much look forward to working with you over the coming years. I recently took part in an exciting design charrette for Whiskey Island with architects from San Francisco that was sponsored by Parkworks. Can you talk about plans that MetroParks may have in taking a more active role in managing some of our lakefront assets, including Whiskey Island, Cleveland's front porch, and fastening the clasp on the emerald necklace?
Thank you. That's an absolutely fantastic question. When I came to be looking at the Cleveland MetroParks almost a year ago, one of the things that had had been highlighted was the management of over 15 plus acres worth of shoreline in the greater Milwaukee area. And when you look at the ability to connect with a fresh body of water with a great city like Cleveland, it seems natural that we want to continue to embrace that type of atmosphere. Having said that, there's a tremendous amount of research that I've done and staff has done to really look at what is the true fabric of the lakefront, how it's managed, who it's owned by to include the city, how the state of Ohio has their current lease, 50-plus year lease on the property. So we've been looking at all those types of different options. Now, to and include, as we're moving forward towards our levy campaign, and I like how you tied in, the clasp on the top of the emerald necklace. Again, when you look at Stinchcomb's true vision, it didn't include that. But as you look forward to be a true visionary for the next 100 years, what does that look like? And MetroParks has been looked to as a leader in conservation of those type of assets. So it seems like a very natural fit. Again, there are a lot of things that we're going to be looking at to include Wendy Park, Whiskey Island. We're currently working on a plan to complete the towpath to come across into the park. And what does that exactly mean to the citizens of Cleveland would be a greater access to the lakefront.
Mr. Zimmerman, thank you for coming today. I can't tell you how what a great responsibility you have. Really, you're the trustee for all of us to the best asset we have in greater Cleveland, and that's one of the things I don't think we publicize it enough. I've been all over, and I don't think anybody has as good a park system as we do, and it's something that Cleveland can be proud of. I also don't think that we publicize enough Mr. Stinchcomb. His vision is amazing every time you go into those parks and you see everything about it. I'll bet you 99% of the people in this community, in this area, don't even know who Mr. Stinchcomb is. And frankly, there's just not enough publicity. We owe so much to him. But having said that, I have a question for you. Okay. I've ridden all over the park system on the roads, and I always find it amazing how we were able to acquire, the park system was able to acquire that land, and especially I'm amazed as how we were able to acquire the land from on the Mill Creek area, because we have an area that goes from there all the way to Akron that was never developed. And it would have been a fortune. Everything developed. It was the industrial area. It was on Cuyahoga, the river. Why, do you have any idea why that area maintained its pristine nature all these years that we were able to acquire it? Not that long ago.
Well, that's a great question. On the tour that Jim and I, worked through, one of the treasures that I saw was the Mill Creek Falls that was opened up a number of years ago, and that picture is actually one that I do want to hang in my office. It's actually got the railroad tracks behind it. It's got a very urban setting, but yet here's this pristine area, and there's now a park that's tied all into it. I know plans as we're working to the future, we're still trying to continue to connect all the different areas all the way across, so that that area to Garfield, to the towpath, to Akron, and all the way down, that we do have this huge linked up system. And when you look at the true treasures, and I agree, Stinchcomb, I mean, when I look at coming from the park system, when you look at Olmsted's influence and you look at Stinchcomb's influence, almost 93, almost 100 plus years later, how true it stayed to the mission and how land has been acquired and assembled along all of the corridors to put together this true emerald necklace. So again, a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, my name's John Barris, Cleveland Waterfront Coalition. Really enjoyed hearing some of these discussions about MetroParks taking a greater role on the lakefront. My question is, because you're from the Milwaukee County Parks and had some experience there, do you see any similarities here, or do you care to talk about how that kind of affects your vision? Because, you've had that experience in Milwaukee.
In reference to the lakefront or in reference just to the park system itself?
Really, the lakefront.
Well, again, when I look at what the lakefront meant to the citizens of Milwaukee County, and not just Milwaukee County, it was a regional type atmosphere. When you look at Ozaukee, Washington, Waukesha, Racine, all the counties that surrounded it did use that area as a true draw. It happened also along the 15 miles of shoreline. There was a couple of golf courses, there was beaches, waterfront access was a tremendous asset to the region. And when you look at the corridors that go down into it, they were all accessible. In fact, last night as I was driving through, I actually had to fly back for a meeting. I was driving through, and how, interestingly enough, in all the years that I lived there, I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to all the different freeway signs, but how well signed it is to get to the lakefront. There are so many different pathways to get down there, meaning it's very accessible. You can come straight down. The corridor from the state capitol, I-94, comes all the way straight down, and if you don't get off of it, you'll actually end up in the lake. So what I'm saying is that there is direct access to it. And one of the things that I first noticed when I got here is that it seems very hard and disjointed to get to a lot of the areas. Having talked about the Whiskey Island and some of those other things, we sat in on a planning meeting less than a week ago looking at that, and they talked about the distances, the great distances it takes to get from downtown Cleveland all the way around, whether it be by bike, whether it be walking, or by a car. It's a tremendous amount of time and commitment to go all the way down and around to get to Edgewater, to get to Whiskey Island, and those parks. And not to include the parks on the east side, whether it be Euclid, Gordon, Dike 14, those type of things. So access is definitely a key. MetroParks cannot do it alone. We definitely need partners in this. I see Ann's in the audience today. Tim Donovan's here. There's a tremendous amount of people that are truly passionate about this. MetroParks is at the forefront of trying to help push things forward and take the plans from previous mayors, previous administrations, and start to put some action behind some of these things.
Thank you, Brian, and welcome. Tim Donovan from Ohio Canal Court. I wanted to publicly thank Cleveland MetroParks for the work they've been doing prior to your coming here on the towpath trail and some of the planning that we have underway in Cleveland area here to connect that trail through the valley. You mentioned back in the early days when Stinchcomb was envisioning this new kind of park for Cleveland and how he kind of left the Cuyahoga River behind in a way. And as I understand it, he did it for good reasons, because at that time the river was our place where we made money. That's where the jobs were. That was our industrial valley, our workshop. Well, certainly times have changed now, and I think we have a rare opportunity as we start to look, as you say, to the next 100 years on reclaiming the river for the public good, reclaiming the lake for the public good, and in connecting these together with the neighborhoods on either side, both east and west, we can come up with probably the best system of trails and parks in America. So, that's a statement, it's not a question. I guess my question is, since you do seem to be someone who has delved into the history here, do you have any ideas in terms of some new kinds of thinking with Cleveland MetroParks, especially as you enter the urban area? Because Cleveland MetroParks has not really had an urban presence per se. You've taken over some of the larger regional parks, I know, within the city, but this is going to be a new experience. Anything that hops into your mind here as you start to make those steps into the urban fabric of Cleveland?
Well, I think that's a great question, Tim. And again, it's such a pivotal time here in the MetroParks history as we look forward to our next 100 years and how do things really tie in and the relevance of things. And by being part of the group plan discussion and how the fabric of the downtown area relates to and how do we connect, that type of thing. Those are things that we're all going through right now. Having worked in Milwaukee, that's got a fairly extensive park system with more of the in the urban fabric as well, parks that have been taken over from the city as well. When you look at Garfield and Washington, some of the ones here, part of the planning team that we brought in, Edge Consulting, Pros Consulting, and Wallace, Rogers, and Todd of the East Coast, we were looking at all of those direct tie-ins of how do we provide health and wellness, and how do we provide that direct connection. We've got PNC is helping us power a new vehicle to get into the schools and help tie in those things. We're really trying to hook a kid on nature. That's really one of the things we're trying to do. And when you think of our Youth Outdoors program and Institute for the Great Outdoors, how we're bringing kids and adults that have never experienced a cricket or stars or a leaf, whatever it happens to be. We the Metro Parks have really done a good job in a lot of the outer areas, but are really looking for that next step into the more of the urban area.
Thank you very much for your comments. I'm curious about the relationship between the government entities. I mean, certainly when you were in Milwaukee, you had the city of Milwaukee, the county of Milwaukee, state of Wisconsin, and the federal government. You've got the same thing here. You've got a city, you've got the county, you've got the state, and you've got the federal government, all of whom have roles to play in your life. And I'm just curious as to how you see those government entities sort of connecting to one another and how they impact your work.
Great question. I'll give you just a little bit of background. When I came from Milwaukee, I was an appointment of the park director. The park director worked for the executive side of the government in Milwaukee County. So there was one elected county official, and then there were 19 county board supervisors that really govern the rest of Milwaukee County. So when we would go to put forth budgets and projects and things, we really had to build coalitions. We would submit our budget through the county executive, and then that would go over to the county board side, and it would get battled back and forth, and sometimes things didn't always come back the way we had necessarily planned, but we always worked through the fabric of whatever we were given. So how does that relate to here? Being a separate political subdivision, having Chief Judge Anthony Russo as the presiding judge, and then 3 appointed commissioners that serve at the pleasure of the judge, non-paid positions, we definitely have an up because we're not necessarily part of that political fabric. How do I see ourselves relating to the new county executive? I've already made some contact with the new county executive, Fitzgerald, looking at those things. I've had conversations through Mayor Jackson's staff, looking at how does Metro Park start to partner with some of the other governmental agencies. So I don't see one single agency taking all of the responsibility. I really see a group of a coalition of things working together to continue to build Cleveland.
Director Zimmerman, thank you for your service. Yesterday, standing exactly where you were 24 hours ago, was economist and a leader on local food, and talking about Cleveland's role as the second best city in the country for local food and urban agriculture. Our sister park system to the south, the CVNRA, has a program whereby people can farm on the land and live there, and it's been highly successful. I'm wondering if in your incredible vision there's any incorporation of local food within the vast expanses of the Cleveland Metro Parks.
Thank you for the question. That is one area that I haven't, being a farmer, you'd think that'd be one of the things that I'd be looking at, but that hasn't been part or hasn't been on the radar screen from my end of things, but having traveled through the city and seeing some of the urban gardens, having being out touring one of the east side areas on the cooperatives and how they're looking at farming lettuce, I believe is one of their things. They're looking at putting 5 acres under glass of lettuce and how they're really looking at growing things locally. You can definitely see where there's a lot of positives, and they talk about Cleveland being the crown jewel or the unheralded area for culinary arts and that type of thing. And you look at Michael Simon and some of the other things, and it was on NBC, and they talked about all those different things. As far as the fabric of the conservation, education, recreation, it hadn't really come to mind yet at this point in time, actually farming in that sense. So one of the things, having gone through Slavic Village and some of the other areas, looking at how we're reclaiming some of those neighborhoods and how producing some of the local produce in those areas can help the fabric of the community.
Metro Parks has some excellent golf courses. The Bethpage State Park in New York also has a couple of very good golf courses, and they attracted a U.S. Open there not once but twice, which brought in a tremendous investment into the park system there, as well as bringing a tremendous economic boon to the area. It's rather the golf equivalent of getting the Olympics. Is there any thought within the metro parks to approaching the USGA to try to attract a major golf event to one of the metro parks golf sites?
Wow, that's a fantastic question. One that I did not near anticipate. But interestingly enough, having spent the day in Wisconsin, actually had a breakfast with Pete Dye, one of the foremost architects. He happened to be at Kohler, Wisconsin, Whistling Straits, and they were looking at different renovations to keep that golf course fresh, as they've hosted a number of tournaments, and they will be continuing to host a number of tournaments. One of the things that they're finding in golf in particular is that as they go to return to sites, that the market doesn't necessarily respond as they had in the very first time. So for instance, the very first time they went into Bethpage, all the excitement, all the corporations, everything. And then as they return, they start to see diminishing returns. So having said that, one of the things that Pete had mentioned is that they are continuing to look at new and forging markets forward where corporate and citizens and golf enthusiasts will continue to embrace and support that type of tournament atmosphere. Having been associated with a USGA event in Wisconsin and PGA Tour events, it can truly create a huge buzz and an economic boon for the area. I'm not sure if Sean's quite ready for the U.S. Open at one of the courses, but we would be interested in any and all opportunities to highlight the greater Cleveland assets. And again, it's a true pleasure to be here. Not only did the MetroParks commissioners and the chief judge choose me, my wife and I and son chose to come to Cleveland to make a difference.
Hi, Brian. Hunter Morrison, former. Can I hold it, please? Thank you. Former planning. I'll give it back. Tony, I will give it back. No, I just welcome to Cleveland as somebody who took over the planning department at the age of 32. I know what it's like to be dismissed as the intern. So I hope your career is as successful as mine was. Let me make a few suggestions. There is an inventory and archive in the Cleveland Public Library that we rescued from City Hall some years ago through the Cleveland Planning History Project, which has all the old park maps, including the acquisition maps from Rockefeller Park and the inner ring, well defined in the 19th and early 20th century to link the Cleveland parks together. So those maps are there, and Jim, if you want to talk later, I'd be glad to talk about that. The second thought for you and your staff is that this is a rare opportunity because Cleveland, like Youngstown, is a shrinking city. There's a lot of vacant land, and the opportunity to go back and do what we wanted to do way back when, in terms of creating park networks, is a lot easier now with the vacant property. So integrating with what the city of Cleveland's doing to look at those properties, look at the riparian areas, the former stream beds, tying those things together. The third is an offer, and that is to come out to Youngstown, to the oldest metro parks in Mill Creek from 1891, and to see what's happening there, and to start linking those things together. And I would second your opinion of bringing Stithcombe further up into the profile, because Volney Rogers, who was the founder of that park, is the local hero. And in all the tough times in Youngstown, Volney Rogers and Mill Creek MetroParks is the place that community points to. So welcome, and I'd love to take you out to Youngstown and show what we're doing there.
Thank you. There wasn't really a question there, but I will actually try to tie in a couple of things that we're trying to do. One of the things that I started to do, and it had been done before, is really invite the park directors from the area, whether it be Geauga, Lake, Lorraine, Medina, those areas, into kind of a planning meeting, and really to help me get up to speed for what they're trying to do to try to link. And at the end of the day, it's really linking our park district, to Summit County, to Lake, to Geauga, wherever it happens to be. So anytime we can get creative and that type of thing, and if there's an opportunity to learn from another area, I got to spend a day down touring the Toledo and Dayton area and some of the fantastic things they're doing along some of the water corridors. They're creating some kayaking opportunities along the riverfront. So there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity to explore, and I appreciate the offer.
Brian, Joe Marinucci. Wanted to follow up with actually a question I think Tim began with and then Barry built upon, but that is the relationship with the state of Ohio, and in particular the Department of Natural Resources. Given the election and the fact that the state is really going to have to, from what I understand, trim $7 to $8 billion out of their budget, my guess is the Department of Natural Resources will be under stress from a financing perspective, a revenue perspective, and obviously our lakefront is populated with a number of their facilities, their parks. Do you see any challenge going forward in terms of the relationship with ODNR, or do you see any opportunities from the MetroParks perspective of some of the things that may be happening over the next few years?
Thank you, Joe. Again, I'd like to reiterate, when you look at, the fabric of the lakefront and it's, whether it's the last, frontier of what, MetroParks moves into, in a built-out city, where you look at the repurposing of some of the community areas that have been hit by the foreclosure crisis. We're very mindful from a MetroPark standpoint of our relationship with the state. We continually partner with them. We have grants that go through those different programs. Conversations with the current administration, the new administration coming in. We hope to provide some insight into what they're looking at from a management standpoint of all their natural resource assets, and what does it mean on a local and regional perspective. One of the interesting tie-ins is the state does own land on the lakefront as well. So, what does that mean as a shareholder, as a lake landowner, and what does it mean for the city of Cleveland as well, who ultimately owns Edgewater. We also have, Cuyahoga County that owns Wendy Park, Whiskey Island. So there's a number of governmental agencies that, all really need to sit down as we're working forward in our strategic plan, putting forth some ideas as to how they see the management of these things to continue to the future, so that people will have access, long term, and the things that they're looking for as far as assets actually in the parks to create that type of atmosphere.
Hi, Pat Nobley, Achievement Centers for Children. And first, I just want to express our gratitude to you, Vern Hartenberg, the MetroParks commissioners, and all of MetroParks for the wonderful supportive partnership you have given our Camp Cheerful, offering opportunities for children and young adults with disabilities to experience all the wonders of nature and the recreation. So first of all, thank you so much. Secondly, I'm curious how your career path led you to your previous job and then brought you here, and what you think were some of the key areas that are enabled you to come here at such a young age and accomplish what you did.
Well, thank you. That's a great question. When I really look back at going through college and things, and I thought I had it all figured out, that I was going to be on a golf course, and that was really what I was looking at doing. And I did have the opportunity in the mid or early 2000s to go back to Milwaukee, which I made a promise to my wife if something ever came up in Milwaukee that I would apply for it, because we were living out of state, and had the opportunity to go back. And as I worked through that park system, I really had a greater appreciation, having lived there in the early 90s. I didn't really understand what that park system actually all was about. It was over 15,000 acres. There was a lot of pocket parks that were related to those communities. And then as I started to work through running the golf courses, then moving up to the operations position, I really saw how we were stewards of the land and how we took care of things. And when this opportunity came up, and having done the research on it, to find out that there was only 5 executive directors in the 93-year history, I'm like, wow. That's truly impressive. And then I started to do, the research and looked at Stinchcombe and what Schick did and growth and moving all the way up to Hartenberg in the last 20 plus years. And when you look at the evolution of the system, I was just in absolute awe. And I'm like, I have to come down and see this park system. And then getting the opportunity to tour it, I couldn't get enough of this park system to see what had been created. And Jim will attest to that. We spent, I think he picked me up at 7 o'clock in the morning. I think he dropped me off at like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock that night. We saw every ounce of this park system, and it's truly an honor to be bestowed as the sixth director. And again, I didn't set out with that in mind, but when I saw this park system, like, this is a must-have to lead the MetroParks to the next 100 years.
Thank you. Marie Kittredge from Slavic Village Development, and thank you for raising up our Mill Creek Falls and History Center there. It's a great facility. This is an opinion question. I know you're in the middle of strategic planning and don't want to pin you down on anything, but as you talk about the different types of facilities that the MetroParks has, from active and mountain biking and golf courses and the zoo through invasive species and habitat restoration, looking forward, where do you see an emphasis? Is it more on the conservation end and preservation end, or is it more creating opportunities for the healthy, active type of exercise and fitness and recreation?
That's a great question. It's something that we I won't say we struggle with, but we look at, and I look at, on a daily basis. When you look at, the balance that has been trying to be created, you have 80% passive recreation, which is still a recreation, whether you're out walking or hiking or bird watching or that, you're at least getting out into the park system doing things. Balancing that with the 20% on the other side, whether it be, softball or golf or what have you. So the balance has worked very good over time for the park system, and I look to continue that type of balance as we move forward. Now, where things could start to shift as we move into, the process of, how does the lakefront fit into the fabric, and do we look at what types of active recreation components could be programmed into there? When you look at how active the towpath is, that's a true, corridor of people, and people continually want to find more ways to connect to that towpath and be able to travel up and down all the way, and eventually, ending up here and in Lake Erie. So again, anytime people can get out and get active, and when you look at Edge Consulting that was brought in out of Columbus, Ohio, it's a former Buckeye that actually created the firm, and we did choose them despite that. But they're very much into the urban fabric. They're very much into health and wellness components, and they really are going to provide us with some things that we hadn't necessarily looked at before.
The MetroParks recently took over the Seneca golf course from the city of Cleveland. Could you be a little more specific about what kind of plans you have for that property?
Great question. Seneca Golf Course has been part of the city fabric for greater than 60 plus years. That process or project has taken over 15 years. The MetroParks looked at that property with the city under Mayor White's administration, so a number of years ago, and I certainly hope that doesn't segue into anything that we're looking at doing in the future, that it takes 15 years to get something done. Having said that, Seneca is a great piece of property from a land conservation end of things. It links our reservation through Brecksville, Broadview Heights. The State Ohio Buckeye Trail goes through there as well. It's the headwaters to the Furnace Run. We are in the process of right now of assembling a consultant team to come in and look at what does it mean to reconfigure that golf course. We have promised at the minimum of 18-hole facility, so we would look at paring that golf course down. There was 136 plus acres that were preserved. On the opposite side was the original tree farm as part of the city where they were moving their urban trees out of. So all in all, over 400 plus acres are now protected from development. So whether you're pro-golf or pro-conservation, I think it's a win for all involved.
One of the things that hasn't been mentioned much is use of the waterways for canoeing or kayaking, and I know there's limited use out at Hinckley, but is there any other parts of the park that are available for canoeing or kayaking activity today, or could be in the future?
That's a great question. In fact, when we were looking at the plans for Wendy Park and Whiskey Island, that's one of the things where our Institute for the Great Outdoors puts their kayaks in. We also have the marina over on the Rocky River side where we do some programming. There's actually an affiliate group over there, 41 Degrees, where they actually rent canoes and kayaks out of to go up and down the Rocky River. One of the things you look at as we're moving into the river corridors as even commuter areas, that's one of the things that the city of Milwaukee was looking at, is people actually commuting on some of the waterways. So it's going to be interesting to see how we move things forward in the future. Some of the areas aren't necessarily as sustainable for it here in the area as I've been told. So it may be something that we're looking at forward.
Good afternoon, Brian. You've talked a lot about a physical strategy of trails and land acquisition and so on. Could you talk a little bit more about a social strategy in terms of the potential role of the metro parks as we go forward into the 21st century? You know, historically, the parks in the Stinchcomb's era were developed because of the unhealthy condition of, the industrial urban America. It was part of a national movement about parks and that kind of recreation. Today, when we look at what young people in particular know or don't know, their lack of ecological literacy and a whole array of issues around why they should care about the natural systems, could you talk a little bit about sort of a role that perhaps the metro parks could play because our school systems are under stress, they're teaching to the test, there isn't time, there isn't a sort of a ubiquitous opportunity for young people to have an experience that is deeper than just being in nature, but having a deeper educational experience?
Great question, Paul. It's interesting. I'd like to tie in one of Stinchcomb's quotes here real quick. Stinchcomb wrote back in the early 1900s that man is an outdoor animal. He talks about people that are wary of the busy commercial urban life need a refuge in woodlands, waterways, hills, grass, and wildlife to provide healthful rest and recreation. Now, when you look at tying that in, one of the positives, the Washington Golf Learning Center, site of the 9-hole facility, the First Tee program, what they've done there, the Audubon certified, having met with Patty Lopresti, the new executive director over there, the school that MetroParks is working with, how they're trying to work on educating them, bringing them over to learn some of the life skills of the game of golf. So they're actually providing part of what I would call the true traditional gym class is actually coming over onto the golf course, and they're starting to teach some of those life skills. So some of those things are already starting to happen. Some of the other programs, the PPIP program, Parks Pathway Internship Program, starting to really integrate people into what it means to have a career or a job into the metro parks. Because too often people don't realize that they could have a career as an animal keeper or as a zoo director or marketing director or whatever it happens to be. But there's truly a tremendous amount of opportunities that we need to continue to explore in the high schools. We do partner with our naturalists. They're in the school systems. To that tune, the MetroParks has 2 buses where we'll actually go to schools, pick people up, bring them to the zoo to try to educate from that end of things, as well as all the different natural sites throughout all of the county.
Yeah, I wanted to extend a question about the kayaking. I've noticed at the Huntington Reservation, Lakefront Reservation, you would think you'd be able to easily get a kayak in there. Right now there is no easy place. The only place you can is at the handicap area, and they don't allow you to pull your car into there if you're not handicapped. So extending on that last question, I guess it's not really a question, it's more of a statement. I'd like to see that as the planning continues for that reservation, that more access for small boats, non-motorized boats, perhaps be considered as part of that.
I think anytime that, having lived on one of the other Great Lakes, Lake Michigan, and now living down here on Lake Erie, anytime you can link land and water together to, one of the largest fresh bodies of water in the world, it's an absolutely fantastic thing. So as we're looking forward to our next 100 years, all those types of questions as we're moving forward in our strategic planning and the questionnaires that we're sending out in the surveys and the groups that we're forming will hopefully have answers to some of those areas where we can put in and have more access to the lakefront. Thank you.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we have been listening to Brian Zimmerman, Executive Director of the Cleveland MetroParks. Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.